Everyone, welcome back. We talked about utilitarianism in the last video, in the previous video. So this is the third video. And now we're going to talk about the utility monster, which is an objection to utilitarianism. It's an argument against utilitarianism. And it's a thought experiment. So we talked about thought experiments earlier, and now we're going to see a thought experiment in action as a tool to reject a theory. So we talked about that a little bit in the start of the course when we talked about thought experiments, but we haven't really used one in that way yet. But this is sort of a classic thought experiment, the utility monster. So it's a thought experiment raised as an objection to utilitarianism. So the utility monster comes from Robert Nozick, who is a political philosopher, wrote a book called State, Anarchy, and Utopia, and he argued against utilitarianism. He thought utilitarianism got it wrong. And so Robert Nozick's utility monster thought experiment goes like this. Imagine a person that has the capacity to feel more happiness than all other people combined. So you have, 7.5 billion people on Earth. Let's imagine one person, who we will call the utility monster, who just has the capacity to feel more happiness than all 7.5 billion other people combined. This one person has no diminishing returns. They feel more happiness than everyone else combined. They don't automatically feel it, but if we give them food or put our resources into making them happy, then they will feel more happiness than the rest of us combined ever possibly could. Now, such a person does not exist, never has and never will, but this is a hypothetical case meant to show that there's something wrong with the core idea of utilitarianism. So this hypothetical person who feels more happiness than everyone else combined, if we put all of our resources into making this person happy, that will maximize happiness. All of our resources, all of our food, all of our supplies, all of our water, electricity, everything goes into making this person happy. That will maximize happiness. Because if we spend those resources amongst everyone else on Earth, we will get less happiness than we would if we gave it all to the utility monster. So even if millions or billions of people starve to death, it still maximizes happiness because this one person, the utility monster, feels so much happiness that it outweighs the pain and suffering of millions of people starving to death. They feel so much happiness that it outweighs all of the pain caused by the rest of us starving to death. Because the utility monster feels more happiness than the rest of us combined ever will. And so if we want to maximize happiness, like utilitarianism says, then we have to let everyone else on Earth starve so that we can put all of our resources towards making this one person happy. So just, for example, imagine for a minute that people from shampoo commercials are real, right? Like we've all seen shampoo commercials. These people feel more joy washing their hair than any of us will ever feel in any circumstance, right? They rub some Pantene on their scalp and they are feeling a euphoria that you and I will never know. We'll never experience that kind of joy. Look at that. Look at how happy that person is. None of us, nothing you do or I do will ever match that level of happiness. So just imagine that these commercial people are real. Now in real life, they're not. This is an actress pretending to enjoy shampoo that much. But just imagine, hypothetically, that the shampoo commercial people are real. That means we would have a moral obligation, if utilitarianism is right, to put all of our resources as a planet into giving these people shampoo. Because the joy that they feel shampooing their hair is so much greater than any joy or happiness the rest of us will ever feel. So however happy you think you would be not starving to death, still not as happy as the shampoo commercial person shampooing their hair with money that would have been spent on your food. Like, we could spend money feeding you and keeping you alive, or we could spend that money buying shampoo to go to the utility monster. And if we want to maximize happiness, then what we have to do is spend that money on shampoo for the utility monster. So you and I starve to death while the utility monster shampoos their hair, because that's what maximizes happiness. So the utility monster is supposed to be a problem for utilitarianism, because utilitarianism says we have a moral obligation to maximize happiness. The morally right thing to do is whatever maximizes happiness. So if the utility monster is real, in the hypothetical case, the thought experiment, where the utility monster is real, where these shampoo commercial people are real, in that case, we have a moral obligation to let everyone else starve so that we can put all of our resources towards giving these people shampoo. And that seems wrong, right? Utilitarianism would say, in this case, we have to let millions or billions of people starve to death so that we can make one utility monster happy. And that seems immoral. That seems wrong. It seems like we clearly shouldn't let millions of people starve to let one person shampoo their hair to their heart's content. That seems obviously incorrect. That seems morally wrong. Yet, doing so would maximize happiness. That would increase the total amount of happiness in the world. And so, Nozick argues, this shows that there can be actions that maximize happiness and yet are not morally right. It is at least in theory possible for there to be actions that are morally wrong and still maximize happiness. So that means that we cannot define morally right as maximizing happiness. Morally right and maximizing happiness can't be the same thing the way the utilitarian says they are, because they can come apart. Something can maximize happiness and not be morally right, like letting people starve to death to give the utility monster shampoo. That maximizes happiness, but it's also morally wrong. So the utilitarian is wrong to say that maximizing happiness is always morally right. It's not, it turns out, according to this thought experiment. And that's Nozick's argument. The utilitarian says that maximizing happiness is always morally right. And so Robert Nozick gives this thought experiment that seems to show that there is a case where maximizing happiness would be morally wrong. And so that means utilitarianism is false, because utilitarianism says increasing happiness in the world is always morally good. And Robert Nozick says, no, it's not. It's not always morally good. There are hypothetical cases where maximizing happiness would be morally bad. So we should reject utilitarianism because it tells us, in some hypothetical cases, to do the wrong thing. It gives us the wrong answer in some questions of morality. Right? And so that's the utility monster thought experiment. It says something must be wrong with utilitarianism's definition of right and wrong, because it gives us the wrong answer. It tells us to do something morally wrong. It tells us that a clearly bad action, letting millions of people starve to death to give shampoo to the utility monster, that clearly bad action is morally right, according to utilitarianism. But it's not right. So we should reject utilitarianism. That's the utility monster thought experiment. Now, some people might still argue, some utilitarians have argued that, well, just like we can reject the intuition in the organ case and say, no, it really is morally right to kill the one person to donate their organs to 5 people. Some utilitarians have said, okay, but that applies to the utility monster too. Some utilitarians have said, yes, the utility monster is a weird case. And yes, it seems really morally wrong, but it's not. They've just bitten the bullet, some utilitarians, and said, look, feeding the utility monster, giving the utility monster shampoo or whatever at the expense of everyone else feels morally wrong, but it's not. It's still morally right. Luckily, that will never happen. Luckily, that will never happen because there's no such thing as utility monsters. So some utilitarians have said that the considerations about happiness being the most important thing still apply, and we should follow that through and just accept the weird, difficult conclusion in the utility monster case, and just accept that it's morally right to let people starve to feed the utility monster. That has not been a popular answer, but some have said that. And so to those utilitarians, Robert Nozick introduces the experience machine, which is another thought experiment that we will talk about in the next video. So I'm going to stop this video and I will pick it up again with the experience machine.